Howdy everyone, and today I'm testing out a brand new lens from Samyang, which is about to hit the market, the Samyang AF 85mm f1.4 FE. It's currently just for Sony's mirrorless E-mount cameras, full frame or APS-C, and it has autofocus. And I'd like to thank Samyang for sending me an early copy of this lens for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. It's nice to see a new autofocus 85mm f1.4 lens on a Sony E-mount, as there's only one other at the moment, the hideously expensive but apparently excellent Sony 85mm f1.4 GM at £1,500. But this Samyang lens costs £600 in the UK or $700 US, far less. And everyone loves to use a fast 85mm lens on a full frame camera. They give you lovely background separation, making them great for portrait photography, although they're not so telephoto that your background just vanishes. And of course, f1.4 lets in tons of light for shooting in darker situations. On an APS-C camera, your images will be the full frame equivalent of 128mm, with an equivalent depth of field of about f2.2, so a lot tighter, perhaps even better for subject photography and event photography. Please note that this lens does not have image stabilization, although most of Sony's newer camera bodies have it built in anyway, which is awesome by the way. Now, as you can see, this lens is big. Its build quality is strong and metallic, weighing about 600 grams, so you will really know that this thing is in your camera bag or on your camera. There's a very thin weather sealing gasket around the rear mount. Samyang do emphasize that most of the lens's ingress points are well sealed for dust and moisture, just don't drop it in a bathtub. The lens's only control point is that manual focus ring. As always, it's an electronic focus-by-wire system that activates the focus motor, and I had no problems in using it quite precisely when I needed, and it works smoothly. The autofocus motor itself works quickly and accurately. It only makes a very slight clunking noise as it locks on focus, but that will really get picked up by the internal microphone on your camera when doing video work. Here in video mode it is slightly slow, but it does focus much faster when shooting in stills mode. And if you're doing portrait photography, then I'm happy to tell you that eye autofocus works perfectly on this lens. If you have a Sony camera with that feature, it's seriously useful. Its filter thread size is a pretty universal 77mm in diameter, and the lens comes with a somewhat shallow lens hood, which is made of nice quality plastic. Overall, build quality here is very nice, and more importantly, the autofocus system works nice and reliably, in my experience. Alright, let's test its image quality by mounting it onto my Sony a7R II with its demanding full-frame 42MP sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on here. At f1.4 we see very good sharpness in the middle of the image, contrast is average. Over in the corners we see average sharpness. At f2 it's about the same, but the middle of the image looks really punchy now with excellent contrast. f2.8 is absolutely perfect in the middle, and the corners look quite good now. f4, f5.6 and f8 all get gradually better. Even the darkest aperture of f16 remains very good. So, on full frame we're seeing a pretty solid performance here. The lens is always very sharp in the middle and across most of the image frame. You should stop it down for best results in the corners though, on a 42MP camera. Alright, let's see how the lens performs on an APS-C camera now, my 24MP Sony a5100. At f1.4 there's plenty of resolution in the middle, although contrast is a little low again. Over in the corners we see a little blurriness. Stop down to f2 though, and the corners are a lot sharper and contrast is improved everywhere, and at f2.8 the corners are very impressive. They stay about as sharp down to f11, although f16 is looking softer now from the effect of diffraction. kick in a bit sooner on APS-C. Overall, this is a nice example of the sweet spot advantage in play on an APS-C camera with more impressively sharp image quality. Nice. Alright, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting on a full frame camera. The lens projects a negligible amount of pincushion distortion, desirable on a portrait lens as it makes your subject look just a little thinner. Vignetting at f1.4 is heavy despite the large front element. At f2, corners brighten up a little, and at f2.8 we see pretty even illumination. Let's see about close-up image quality now. This lens can focus as closely as about 90 centimeters to your subject, not close at all really. At its closest distance and f1.4, the image is a bit soft. f2 is slightly sharper and f2.8 is sharp. How does this lens perform against bright lights? Not well, really. There's a lot of flaring of all different kinds, bit of a slip up there. Be sure to use the lens's hood whenever you can. Finally, bokeh. Those out-of-focus backgrounds at f1.4 are always very nice and soft to me. In fact, they're really impressive, although we're seeing a little bit of a cat's eye shape to out-of-focus highlights in the corners, but frankly that's normal for this kind of lens. Overall, the Samyang 85mm f1.4 is a very well done optic. It has a good deal of sharpness, its autofocus works great, the bokeh is very nice, and distortion is low. It could do with working a bit better against bright lights, and I'd like to see it focusing just a bit closer to your subject, but on the other hand, it has great build quality and it costs way less than Sony's competing lens. This Samyang optic is going to be a great workhorse lens for a lot of photographers, and it's pretty good value for money, so it definitely comes recommended.